just let it close one and let the other one go. Try the first one.
This one or this one?
Yeah, that one. Yeah, close that one.
Come on. Oh, yeah, okay. All right, ready. And we're recording now. Hi, everybody. My name is Danica Joan, and we are here for another panel discussion, our July panel discussion, focusing on freedom and celebration in our relationships between a parent and a child, typically in a situation that was high conflict where the parent and the child relationship broke down. So today I'm handing off the moderator duties to Dawn McCarty. So go ahead and take it away, Dawn.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I am Dawn McCarty, and I have been working with Danica on Kids Need Both for probably a little over a year, maybe a year and a half now. We started pre-COVID and progressed into a virtual platform, which has kind of been a growth experience for everybody. And we're bringing it to you now. All of our hard work and the results are here to bring a monthly panel discussion so that we can talk about some of the issues that parents face, that children face, that professionals face when trying to help families. And today we have Jana. Jana, I would like for you to give us a quick introduction, and then we'll dig in.
Well, thank you so much, Dawn. I'm so happy to be here with you and Danica. I married in 1986, and in 1998, I divorced with two young daughters that were 2 and 5. And I was a single parent for several years and then remarried in 2001. And during this time, my new husband and I had a lot of things that we had to deal with both exes on either side, and everybody changing and our children growing. We had 4 children between the ages of 5 and 7. And we did have some forays into family court, and it was miserable. It's difficult, it's excruciating, it's hard. The family court does not provide justice. And as a result, we often go there looking for it, and that's not really how it all works, is it? But during this time, I began to do coaching with single parents and step families beginning in 2006. And then back in 2012, I was 48. I went back to graduate school and got my counseling license, my postgraduate certificate in marriage and family therapy. And so I give you all that just to say that I've walked in a lot of these shoes that our clients find themselves in. I've walked in, I understand how the family court works, and it's difficult. And so my own work is simply to help families, help parents, help children figure out how to stay out of the middle, how to not align, and how to be independent, how to reduce conflict, and how to build resilience. And that's, I think, what we're talking about here today.
Absolutely. That's a lot of great information, I think. And some of the stuff that you talked about, family courts not necessarily being fair. I think that a lot of people think that if I go through court, what's fair is going to happen. And that's usually what doesn't happen. It's one side wins, one side doesn't win. There's never like a meet in the middle kind of thing where both people walk out equally. It's usually an adversarial type situation. So it's great to have professionals like yourself that can help guide people through, because an attorney goes into court prepared and educated on how to conduct the hearing so that he can help his client win. We go in with absolutely no education. And we're totally relying on that attorney reading our minds. I think in a lot of cases, we think that they know what I'm going through, so they'll know what to say. And I think where you come in and others like you, professionals like you, really needs to kind of be part of that coaching program or a team. We can't just go in just with attorneys. And attorneys, they have a big job to do. Their job is to litigate your case. But then there's all this counseling and all this other things that their clients may need that they just can't do that too. Right. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I just think the whole thing is very traumatic for people because we're talking about their lives. their families, their children, their hearts, right? I mean, this is all of these things that are the most important things. And because of the way the family court system works, and I think that attorneys, I mean, there are many good attorneys out there. There are many that are not, or not as skilled as we would like them to be. But there are many good attorneys out there who want the best for their clients. But I think that often as an attorney, your job is to tell your client what you can do for them or what you will do for them. But the reality is it's still not even up to the attorney. It's up to the judge. It's up to the amicus. It's up to the counselors. You know, one of the things that parents are often asked by their children. So when children start being in the middle of this process, one parent will tell the other kid too much information, will tell the child too much information. They will go to the other parent and say, well, I don't understand why you can't let me spend more time with mom or more time with dad. And the answer I always tell parents to say to their children is, you know, I would love to talk with you about this. However, this is more complicated than just your dad and I making, or your mom and I making a decision. There are many people involved in this process. And so it's just more complicated than you may understand. There's the judge and the amicus and the this and the that, if you need to explain that to your child. But anyway, so we often simplify it, but it's complicated, right? And then if you're a parent that feels targeted or feels alienated, then it's also looking at, you know, Dr. Stephen Miller talks about how the alienating parent will often appear calm, cool, collected, and the alienated parent is angry, frustrated, upset, and quite frankly, traumatized. And so this is another piece of that counterintuitive part. So what is your job as the alienated or targeted parent? Your job is to be calm, cool, and collected. And that is just enormously difficult. But if these parents have an opportunity to understand that how they are presenting themselves really is important, then I have found many parents, given proper basic education on how people are appearing, that can make a huge difference in these cases. Sometimes I'll work with a parent who's getting ready to talk with an amicus attorney, and we will talk about what the amicus is going to ask and what are the answers that amicus is really looking for. They're looking for a parent that is moderate, that is flexible thinking, and that is able to look at different points of view. And this is why it's become so important for targeted parents and alienated parents to really think and be thoughtful about what they're going to say and what they do.
Absolutely, absolutely, because it's such a stressful time. And you mentioned time, and you were also talking about children and talking to children. And one thing children don't understand is the length of time and what goes on in that time frame and the duration of that and all of the things that can take place it's not even comprehensible for them to understand. So we're talking today about how we can raise children independent. This is being the month of July, it's Independence Month, basically. How can we keep children independent of our divorces?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, sorry, that was just like an open question, really.
I'll chime in.
Sorry about that.
No worries. No, like independent of our divorces, the thing is even in the best case situations, I've worked with families where single parents, really, really well-meaning single parents that yet in their frustration of the fact that they're not able to make ends meet financially and their ex is always late on child support, I can't tell you how many children of divorce know adult matters. And this is in, amicable, divorces and separations and stuff like that. So that's part of the thing is we've got to manage our mouth and remind ourselves that we're raising, how can we raise our child to with all the tools that they need as an adult? And part of it is and it goes back to the, we want to make sure that they love their other whole and complete, we got to keep our mouths shut with net.
Well, and I think that it's confusing to both parents and children, right? This whole piece around how much do we tell our children and how much do our children need to know, how much should we tell them? I think sometimes parents feel like one parent never talks about it and they end up being alienated or targeted, right? And so then they're like, well, maybe I should start saying something because this other parent is doing a lot of talking and I'm not standing up for myself. And I think that a lot of times when parents start out, their goal is absolutely correct. And then because the other parent doesn't follow any of the appropriate rules, then both people, it kind of begins a spitting match. And I know that one of the things where my husband and I came down to was that regardless of what other people are doing or not doing, we had to decide for ourselves what was more important. And the other piece of this I'm going to say too is I think it's very confusing for targeted parents because, all parents have some good things and some not so good things, right? Because none of us are perfect. We are all going to have positives. This is this flexible thinking idea of Bill Eddy with the High Conflict Institute. All parents have some good things and some not so good things. All children have some good things and some not so good things. And so as parents, we know that we have faults. We know that we have things that we are not going to be good at individually. What an alienator does is they take the normal faults of a normal parent and they twist them in such a way that it makes the child feel like that other parent is victimizing them. So if, for example, one of the situations I've seen often is you have the targeted parent perhaps was they're single and then now they have a new boyfriend or a new girlfriend. And the other parent will say your mother or your father doesn't love you. They don't care about you. They're just spending all their time with that love interest. However, if you were a single parent that perhaps didn't have a boyfriend or girlfriend, that same alienator would say, well, your mother is just, or your father is just too hovering. They don't ever let you get out and do things. They're just trying to take you over, right? So the point is, it wouldn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're single. It doesn't matter if you've remarried. The alienator takes whatever they can and they use that against the parent. And so it's not fair. It's not right. There are many good people that have been in horrible and awful situations with their children. But unfortunately, as parents, we have to figure out how to help our children stay that independent course. Mm-hmm. One of the ways we do that is to say to them, when they say things to us like, daddy or mommy told me all these different things and I want to understand the truth. This is where a good answer is. It's more complicated than that. There are other things going on. However, one of the things that alienators are great at is they will make the child feel more important because they're giving them information. They will make the child feel older and more responsible. So the problem is when the targeted parent is approached by a child with this, the one thing that I have seen that does not work is for the target parent to say, your father or your mother shouldn't be talking to you about that. You're too young. You shouldn't know. So the problem with that response is it bumps the child to a position of feeling like they're not respected by the targeted parent.
Balance at that time.
Yes, exactly.
So how would you handle that?
You want to chime in there?
Yeah, so I'm curious, how do you handle that? Because if you say nothing, it's like you lose by saying nothing. You lose by defending yourself. You lose by telling the child they're a child and this is adult matters. So how do you empower the child to really start thinking, thinking about a different possibility?
Well, so remember that, so understanding that the other parent is elevating the child and what you don't want to do is is demote the child at this point because it's not going to work, then the third alternative is to meet the child with respect and courtesy. And what that looks like is the parent would say to the child, I can understand why it is important for you to know what's going on. It makes sense to me that you like it, that your mom or your dad is talking to you about these things. And I respect where you're coming from. And so I'd like to know what you think about this and what your opinion is. And I'm happy to listen to it. So the goal here is to not demote the child because it's not going to help you. It'll just make them angry at you, or it will feed into the reinforcing belief by the other parent. Well, your mom or your dad treats you like a kid and I'm not going to, right? It's this whole piece. It's so confusing, but you meet the child where they are, because there's probably always some small kernel of truth in what your child says to you about something they don't like. And you're better off to hear it and to understand, yes, they may have, dad or mom may have told them to say that, but if you even say that to them, then that creates a defensive posture. So you're better off saying, I want to hear what you have to say, and let me know what you think. And then they're going to tell you, and then this is where you have to literally bite down on your tongue or whatever it takes. And you say, thank you for telling me. I really appreciate knowing where you come from. I am going to think about that. I always want you to be able to come to me and talk to me about things. Now, this is not easy. This is very hard. This is not child's play here. This is a grown-up having to allow their child to have an independent opinion, even when they know in their heart and in their mind that it's the opinion of the other parent. But I have seen that there's no other way to manage it than to allow that child to have that opinion. And when you don't respond, don't defend, don't do anything that makes them angry, then they go, oh, well, gee, maybe my mom or my dad is more open than I thought. Well, I talked to mom. She wasn't all that upset about it. So this is that catch-22.
Yeah, and I think it's very important what you're saying there too. And at this point, children, when they're involved, when they're being drugged through the divorce, and I'm sorry to put it that way, but they're kind of being drugged through it along with some of our parents. And I think it's important to realize that they're almost having to grow up immediately. They're having to understand an adult crisis or an adult situation as a child. So they've kind of morphed into there's almost additional curiosity that we wouldn't normally see in a child. There's additional information, fact finding. They start to analyze everything because that's what you're doing. The parents are both analyzing their situation and the other situation, and therefore the children are learning some of that as well and how to analyze. But when you said the way you responded, and I like the balance of power, not saying that the child is brought up, because there's a very fine line between parentifying a child and giving child empowerment to understand, because at this point they need to understand. It's healthier for them to understand rather than leaving them wondering, well, I wonder why he won't talk to me, but mom will. And what does that do? And even if it's the reverse, if dad lets me talk, but mom shuts it down, then they're going to lean a little bit more towards where the communication is coming from. So communication is super important for children because they have to know why. They learn better when they know why. These are just my opinions, but I like exactly how you laid that out, where you didn't really give them a lot of information, but you made them feel good about what you said and that you respected them. And that to me goes a long way, because I'm the child in the scenario where I'm an adult survivor of severe parental alienation. I've been through a lot of stuff that a lot of children may be going through now. And I think it's super important that they learn a little independence so that they don't latch on to the bad habits and then take that forward. So thank you for sharing that information, because I think there's a lot of parents out there that just don't know what to say. And that was a great example. So I really like that.
I'm really enjoying this conversation. And I'm thinking at the times when I was in survival, and in living in the what if world of, oh my God, are my kids going to hate me forever? Am I going to lose the love and affinity from my children? And so I would say to you, like, we need more of this. We need this in book form. We need this in course form to really, so what do you suggest? I mean, what do you do with parents, Gina, who find themselves targeted?
Can you repeat the question, Donica?
So the question is this such gold? This is so like, oh my gosh, this is what I need. But when when you're in your life, you're surviving your kids, they're being belligerent and disrespectful and accusing you of all kinds of things, like all that knowledge, all this juicy stuff goes out the window when we're trying to survive our children.
Well, and remember, my husband and I were put in a lot of these situations ourselves. And so, quite frankly, a lot of what I understand and know comes from my own mistakes. Okay. So I am not talking to you as someone that did it all correctly. In fact, there are many, many things we did not do correctly. And gosh, I have a master's degree and a postgraduate certificate, and I have all this training now, and I can now say what would be great. But the reality is, you're right. When you're in the moment, all of that goes out the window. So here's the other piece of what I say to people that are dealing with this. You must have a plan. You must know exactly. And here's the other piece. So stop being surprised is probably my first suggestion. So when you are in the middle of this kind of thing with your children, stop being surprised. Things like this are going to happen. When we are a good, kind, loving, caring, forgiving person, we will often believe the very best. And it's because we are hoping we will not have to continually be in that situation. But what generally happens when there is alienation or any sort of alignment going on with the other parent and the child is that we are going to repeatedly be put in situations that are going to feel uncomfortable. And so sometimes stop being surprised is about the fact that you've had an expectation that your children will not talk to you about these things, will not ask you about these things, and the other parent's not going to do that. And the reality is the other parent is going to do that. They've done it before. They will probably do it again. And your child is going to have questions for you that you are going to be stunned at, and you're immediately it's going to make you angry or upset. But the problem is when you get angry or upset with your child for telling you what the other parent has said or for asking you questions, then your anger and upset simply reinforces whatever that other parent is saying about you. It reinforces it because they know your triggers just like your child does. This is somebody that's lived with you probably. So the goal here is, the first thing is to stop being surprised. And the second thing is to have a plan, to know what you're going to say and to be able to say it. Now, how do you know what you're going to say? Well, you would talk to somebody like myself or somebody like you guys, because you guys do this stuff all the time. And you can help parents come up with these 2 or 3 or 4 things that they say. But you'll remember that most of that conversation is going to be your child talking to you. And your only job there is to hear them. And don't do any weird nonverbals. Don't roll your eyes. Don't look upset. And so part of that is practicing. So literally.
Well, and that right there, do not return the passive aggressiveness. just kind of. But I wanted to touch on, because you said something earlier and it made me think that, and then you said something again, it brought me right back to that same thought. So when one parent is talking to the child and they're sharing things they probably shouldn't be sharing with the child, it's not the child's position or responsibility to be that sounding board, the therapist, the whatever, the parent. They don't, like Dr. Roseman puts up, you got a mom on one side, dad on the other, and then you draw a T and you have the children underneath. Well, when one of the parents are removed or no longer living in the same household, you don't want to end up bringing one of the children up to that position, and that where they become parentified. And what I wanted to touch on with what you said is, when the child comes to you and says, this is what the other parent is telling me, and they're coming to you to hear your side of the story. And if you fight back, like you said, that could be a pretty, that could be pushing them away. But when you don't fight back, what you're doing is you're creating a safe place for them to land, because they know this parent is telling me all these hostile things. And when I come to this parent, they're telling me they trust me, that they respect my opinion. They want to hear what I have to say, and they don't make me feel bad about myself. And now I want to, talk to this parent more, but I have to be over here more often. So now you've built this like a connection, a new bond. And when we do things in our mind, we create new
pathways.
The pathways.
Yeah.
When we change something, so you're creating a new neural pathway connection with that bond, with the bond with your child, by not giving into it, by not putting your foot in that space. You need to keep your foot in the space that your child wants to come to you, and they know that they can at any time. And everything now that other parent says is going in one ear and out the other, because the child they're smart. They're not dumb. They're smart enough to realize, I don't believe that. And they don't have to say anything anymore now. Now they know, okay, Mom, okay, Dad, whatever.
It's okay to say to your child, I know in the past I've responded, I've gotten upset, or I've defended myself. And I'm really sorry I've done that, because I know that has not been helpful to you. And you can even say to your child, and this is another line that I often encourage parents to use with their child. I know how hard you are working to be a good son or a good daughter to both your dad and me, or to both your mom and me. I know that it is not easy for you, and I really appreciate your effort to talk to me about this. So that's another 2 or 3 sentences that are gold, right? Because
will help them get through this thing that they didn't volunteer for. They just need to survive this and be independent of it. And that gives them, letting them speak to you like that gives them independence.
Right. And I'm not saying that it's okay for them to cuss at you and scream at you and do things at you. I want to be clear, right? Because sometimes we say these things and then, well, that's not okay. But the goal really is mutual respect and courtesy. And mutual respect and courtesy should be a foundational piece of your relationship with your child, regardless of age, but particularly as they move into the teenage years, which are normally a time when a child is going to individuate, they're going to experiment, they're going to ask a lot of questions, and they're going to do a lot of things that you don't like. And I call it the great divide, but it's also not unusual. One parent is permissive, the other parent is structured. The more structured this parent gets, the more permissive this parent gets, right? And so this whole piece around mutual respect and courtesy can help you to stay the course, because that's the only way any of us get through the teenage years with our children. And my daughters are in their 20s, and it's still something that we work very hard to have happen. I'm sorry, Don, go ahead.
I just wanted to say this is really good conversation on helping the child when you have this type of communication like you're laying out here. It helps them, if they ever find themselves in the same position, to see it in a different way, so that they're not repeating what they may have been taught through what they went through. And I just wanted to add that piece. I really like what you're talking about here. This is a great conversation. I wanted to take a second to welcome Caroline. Thank you for joining us this morning. You caught a little bit about what we're talking about.
About that much.
We're just talking about great conversations on what you can say, rather than how we may react when a child comes to you and asks you questions about what the other parent is saying. And sometimes we tend to just react with a response that may not be healthy, and it might end up actually pushing them away. So I know you have some experience with that, but could you first introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about you?
Sure. I'm Caroline Rena. I am a transformational coach, guide, and I'm a connector. I connect people together. I also am, I never get this right. I'm one of the protagonists in the Erasing Family film. And I've had my own experience for about 20 years with my kids, and even now walking through the other side of it, in how to deal with or work through from my own perspective of their pain and the pain that I went through and how to communicate within that pain. So it's even happening as we speak, and it's just important for me, now I managed to get in here. I'm looking forward to being part of this conversation.
Something that came to mind, that I didn't do back in the day with my kids. I definitely made sure that they knew that when they were in my space, that there was no battle. There was no, they weren't caught in the middle in my space, no matter what they said. But the thing that I probably would have put in hindsight was working with a coach and do role play. Like you were talking about, Jana, it's almost like reenacting what possible scenarios would come up when the kids come over and they're determined to ruin the weekend and say horrible things. So maybe doing practicing role play with someone would help me to be prepared for when they do come with their toxic words. What do you think?
Well, I find that children will bring up the same things over and over again, right? So remember the other parent is stirring the pot, whatever that looks like, right? If you feel like you're in this situation, or the other parent doesn't realize what they're doing, but they're still oversharing and it's doing that. If we give them the very big benefit of the doubt. But, what I find is that children are going to say the same things over and over again. So at any point in time, even if you've been responding and reacting in a way that's not helpful, at any point in time, you can say, I've really been thinking about this, and I really appreciate the fact you're bringing this to me. And I want to do this differently with you. You can say that to your child and then do whatever you've practiced. But what I have found is it's the same things. And so we're not asking people to learn 3 paragraphs of sentences. Literally 4 or 5 sentences that you have in your toolbox are probably all that is needed in order to really change that conversation. Probably the harder work is the work you're going to do before you see your children, right? To prepare yourself. So when they come up, and another way I explain it to people too is, when one person puts their hand up, the other person puts their hand up, and you're both pushing, right? It's the forces. Yeah. But when the child comes in and they're upset, they're pushing against you. But instead of pushing back, you simply let go. Mm-hmm. You're not pushing. You're allowing them to say it. You're allowing them to feel it, and you're not shaming them for it. Then that piece works really well. And once you do it 1 or 2 times and see how it works, then it does get much, much easier. But you got to stop being surprised. And you do need to know those 4 or 5 things that you, Donica, or you, Caroline, or you, Dawn, could help them with. Yeah.
I'd like to add a few words to that, because from the parent's perspective, there's I totally agree with the pushback. And it kind of reminds me of Tai Chi. I never actually, I took a class in it one time, and it's somehow things fall into place where you just allow things to occur. And the other piece of it too, that I was gonna say is within the realm of the child's mind, they're not safe. They don't feel safe. Let me rephrase that. They don't feel safe. They don't feel safe in the environment, and the other parent, you, happens to be their safe parent. So somehow in that dynamic, they're gonna come after you because they feel safe to do that. So for me, what I learned is that the work isn't about with my children, the work was about me. The work was being able to settle and center myself and heal myself to the point where my children felt comfortable and safe enough to come to me, and there was no power struggle. I mean, there was a little bit as I was doing my healing work, as I continue to do my healing work. Every so often there's something that comes up, but for the most part, I can see it, as I said, I can see it now the more I do my healing work and get centered and understand how these things work and do those Tai Chi moves, the less they come after with the, and they're in there. I've got a 33-year-old and a 26-year-old. So now it's a little bit different because they're starting to come into their own, understandings about themselves and what happened and all that. But as they were going through that, if I had been able to do the work while that was going on, it would have been a whole different story in the relationship of them, because it would have automatically, energetically released that pressure and the tension that was going on for my children to feel comfortable enough to just start to come to me. That's my impression based off of my own experience in that. So
they're coming into an area where they feel they're a little more independent from what may have occurred in your divorce. Now they can establish a relationship with you.
Yes,
that's
at their age now. And I think too, well, they're separated from the other people involved in this, their father and the other people involved, more than they were before. So then now they also have another awareness of what's happening, and they see things differently, and they can question things or whatever. But that still doesn't for me say that because they're going through and they're okay and I don't have to do anything. That's not the case at all. The most important person to me in this healing journey is and how it happens is me, because if I don't do it, I can't be a safe zone, a real safe zone for them to land in, where they feel like I'm listening to them, I understand them, I feel, I can feel what they're feeling, whatever that is, whatever their pain and their trauma that they went through in their own minds, which is similar yet different, so being able to be that safe landing zone for them is important. And it's important to me to feel, to heal. That's just the bottom line, because it's not a fun journey when you're going through
right.
all that.
Don't you think, but I think the reason why parents can't do it or don't is, one, they don't know how, right? They don't know how. And I think too, because it's inherently unfair, right? Like the position you're being put in is so unfair. And I think that we end up feeling isolated, and we feel like people are constantly judging us.
Yes.
And
yes.
we feel like we can't win, right? We're damned if we do, damned if we don't. And so I think, so my question to you would be, so how did you move from feeling all of those things to being able to really focus on yourself? Because I think that is a missing link for a lot of parents. And it just takes so much time, I think, to even wrap around your head what's happening with your children. But I think that's the missing link. And I'm wondering from you how you did that.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I can't really give a straight answer to that, because it was a process as I was watching what was happening. I do know that I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I just got to the point where I didn't want to deal with it anymore. And I was, and not that I'm not still going through things like that, but this is, I always say this is a journey, so it's not like a one thing happens and then you make a decision and then you're done, or you go through some healing work and then you're done. That's not how it happened with me. I mean, literally, I've been going through my healing journey since I was 27, and I'm going to be 57 this year. So that's a really long time. And then in the middle of all that was walking through that. So I was healing from my own personal experiences with my parents. And then when I started to work through that, I did a lot of forgiveness work, and with my mother, I'm still kind of working with my dad. I've done Dark Nights of the Soul. You know what I mean when I say that?
No.
Okay, so Dark Night of the Soul is when everything just crashes and falls in on you, and you're on the ground screaming and crying and whatever. So at the very beginning, I did a lot of that. So it was a step-by-step, very, very I don't want to use the word tedious, but it was
It's like one step, two steps forward, one back, or one step forward, two back, right? It's
100%.
process.
Yeah, and sometimes it goes good and something shifts, and then sometimes something shifts, and then I like to use the idea of a mountain, like you're climbing up this mountain, but we don't go straight up the mountain. We go like around the mountain. So every time we come back to this one space, it's at a higher level, like a better understanding, but the vista's different. You see different things. You see it from a different perspective. You see it a different time of year. You see it a different way, you know, and every time you climb that mountain, you recognize something and you get to heal that next piece and that next piece. That's why it always feels like it's coming back around again and again and again. Yeah. So, so being able to just be observant and being aware of those things that keep coming around, and it's not your fault that they're coming around. That's natural. That's normal part of the healing process, because there's always your what I've learned is your mind doesn't allow you to get it all at one time, because it would overwhelm you and freak you out and all that kind of thing. So little by little, as you're able to understand what that is, you move up another level and you move up another level and you move up another level. And that's how I've been doing it. And now it's like, yeah, stuff still goes on in my life. And I now am able to just kind of walk through it and breathe through it, whether it's with my children or, you know, other people or whatever that is. And then sometimes I crash in and burn and I got to take a nap, you know, whatever that looks like. So, so yeah, I mean, I hope that helps with that response.
So I have a question. So, okay. So what I hear, because Caroline, you've just recently kind of reconnected and you're in the process of rebuilding a relationship with one of your children, who are adults now, who's an adult now. Dawn is someone who was alienated from her father. So when she became an adult, she sought her dad out. She didn't even know where he was at, found him, and had him for a brief moment in time until he passed. So like, my question is so I'm hearing a couple things, because Caroline's talking about heal thyself, heal yourself. No matter what happens, you've got to heal yourself, because you're the only one that gets to live your life. Second is they're coming out as an adult. They're coming out as adults who are thinking more independently. Is there a particular age, Jana, that they begin to have these moments of reevaluation that my parent's not that bad and maybe I need to reconnect?
So I guess that's the $10 million question, isn't it? And I don't know the answer to it. I don't think anybody can tell you what the answer is. We know that brain development goes on until age 25, maybe a little longer. That's when the prefrontal cortex finally comes in, which is why people do stupid things. And so we know 25, 26, 27, if your child has a learning issue, if your child has ADD or ADHD, if your child has any other mental health issues, sometimes that prefrontal cortex isn't really gearing up until about 30. We also know that sometimes it's simply the independence. You know, sometimes when children go off to college, right? Maybe perhaps they've been alienated, but they go off to college. If you, once they're out and more independent. But of course, one of the things that so often happens in families where children are alienated is their children are encouraged to stay at home, to not become independent, to not learn to drive a car, to not do a lot of things, right, that they would normally do, that healthy young people want to do and eventually move to. And I think that it's life circumstances and experiences. But, I remember in my training with Karen Woodall, she talked about how there is this attachment system, this attachment that our children have with us is still there. It's not that it's gone. It is buried deep into our soul. But then on top of that is this huge layer of guilt and shame. And unfortunately, when that adult child or even that teenager wants to reach out, unfortunately, before they can tap into their attachment with us, they tap into that guilt
Mhm.
And that guilt keeps them from reaching out. And that's one of the reasons why, if you reach out to your children, if you're trying to connect with your children, you don't want to say things that will create a sense of guilt for them. Sometimes saying, I miss you, creates guilt for your alienated child. So you're better off just saying, I'm looking forward to a time when we can be together again, but you need, take care of yourself, and sending love your way. So, and Caroline is nodding. I'll let her talk next, but
Oh my God. Yeah,
there's
you're
no
right.
magic answer here. So
Yeah, there isn't. And the thing about it is, I wanted to add one more thing to it. Wait a minute, because I'm trying to remember. I don't have my pen with me. I just jumped on the call. I'm trying to remember everything. The one thing that stuck in my mind is there's another thing that adds to it. And this is some of the work I've been doing with people, is trauma. When children go through trauma, that adds a whole nother layer of, they don't know what to do. It's part of the process. And that gets, as you know, you get stuck at a certain age, and that's when like the inner child work comes into play to get through that. And that's some of the stuff I've done on myself. And it's some of the stuff I use as a guideline. But if you're in trauma, you've got all kinds of things going on. Depending on the kind of trauma, depending on the bigness of the trauma, you've got complex PTSD happening. You could have regular PTSD happening within that. There's all kinds of things that might be adding to that. But yeah, I agree with you with all the other things that are going on, because they don't really understand or know what to do. They're so scared, and they've been trained to be that way, that there's guilt there, because Danica talks about this all the time. They love both of their parents because that's who we are. and that's how we're set up to be. And we're also curious and connected, like you were saying, the attachment piece of it, especially in motherhood. There's a little bit of a different energetic connection with our children and with fathers. I'm not going to leave that out. It's still in there. It's just they don't know what to do because they're being taught this. And one of the things that I've learned recently, well, not recently, I thought about it years ago, but our minds are easily what's the word I'm looking for? Shifted, like advertising and all this stuff. All these people out there know how to manipulate our minds and make us think certain things. And the parents who are the ones controlling that situation are also doing that with these children. So they don't know what to believe. So at some point, like for me, when I was 27, I was like, wait, something's wrong here. There were some stories that my father told me that weren't true. There were some stories that I heard my mother, about my mother, whatever all this stuff was. And there were some there that were true. I wanted to find the truth. Just like Dawn, I think.
And our memories are actually not very good. Like the further away we get from things, the more we perhaps will not remember them correctly. Right.
Yeah.
And so that also, I think people make the assumption, well, my mother did that to me when I was 16. She's horrible, awful, terrible. And they focus on that. But the truth is they may not really have a full understanding of everything that happened, because their mind is kind of attached onto that one little piece. But it's just
an example, Jana, can I give an example of that real quick, real fast?
Yeah, please.
The lemon example, where your mind doesn't have to be eating a lemon, but the minute you start talking about it, you salivate. That's part of that memory process. So if you can, I'm already doing it. If you do that with a lemon, then everything in your life is going to be like that. So you're 100% on there. Yeah.
I would like to add into this a little bit about from the child's perspective is, yes, we have to deal with a lot of these things, but there's also there's different types of trauma that are stacked. It's not just the one thing, the divorce that happened. It's that maybe maybe a parent didn't show up for my gymnastics match. Maybe, something happened at school or something, and I went home and I needed support and I didn't get that. Those are little things, but then there's bigger things. So we have all these traumas that have happened to us that adds to like in our ACEs studies, one of the big question for children is, did a child lose their parent not to death. It says, does a child lose a parent due to divorce or separation? And it's phrased that way because it causes trauma. That is a traumatic event. So not only is the divorce traumatic, but then add on the fact that they may have lost contact with one of their parents. That's also traumatic. And then every single time there's this argument between mom and dad or the situation, that could be also additional trauma. So we're stacking and stacking and stacking traumas. And like Jana was saying, our frontal lobes are not fully developed until we're at least 25 for girls. And then for boys, it can be a few years even longer. And so we're not really even putting any of that stuff into perspective until that point. So I was about 25 when I really got serious about finding my dad. I had started having my own family. I held my son for the first time and had that connection bond that just instantly took place. And I recognized that as something that I had felt before, but I hadn't felt in a long time. And I thought that is unconditional love. And at that point, I knew that I had a good connection with him way back when, before I was abducted, which is another trauma. So I was abducted away from him when I was 4, and I was abandoned from, my mom left me when I was 2. So there's another trauma. So all of these traumas stack up, and we have to weed through all of this stuff when we don't even know how. And nobody knows, like if I were to come to one of you and say, okay, fix me, you would have to dig in so deep to figure out all those layers of trauma. So this is another thing that I think we have to figure out ways to help children cope with these traumas and help parents recognize that their children are independent of these situations so that we're not adding unnecessary traumas.
A question. Okay, so like I know what it's like. Like I wanted my children to have the perfect childhood, and I wasn't able to give them that. And
Right.
so I think I've had to sort out my own feelings of regret and guilt. And I guess my question to you, Dawn, as an adult child of parental alienation, what kind of experience did you have of feeling like maybe you were responsible? What kind of feelings did you have?
Responsible for my own children, or
as an adult child, because you
my dad?
finally reconnected with your father. And I'm sure there was a lot of emotional feelings of that you dealt with through the spaces. And the fact is you thank God you reconnected with him 2 years before he died, but it was 2 years before he died.
Yeah, and that can be really, that is a hard situation for me at times, because it makes me think about all those times that I did set out to find him. And I would search, and I actually became an apprentice private investigator so I could learn how to do searches like that. And I did find him. I found a marriage license in the state of California after my mom finally in 2008 gave me his birth date. Now his name is Patrick McCarty. There's thousands and thousands of Patrick McCartys in this world. So it was like a needle in a haystack trying to figure out, okay, which one of them is mine. So I really had ups and downs. And when I finally reunited with him, I was so excited that I did, but then I realized, oh my gosh, I missed out on 3 brothers. I have nieces. I could have been there. I could have been involved in their lives had I known. Maybe if I would have really dug in and searched a little bit harder, maybe if I wasn't so criminal justice minded, I would have opened up a face account years before I actually did. And maybe that I would have found him earlier. So I did go through a lot of guilt, and I put that pressure on myself. But then it took more work of me going through the purpose of my life, figuring out what my purpose was. First of all, finally having an ability to put that together, and then seeing that it was the timing for me. And the timing, nobody likes to hear about the time frame of my story, because they don't want that to happen to them. And I don't want it to happen to them either, which is why I'm speaking out. I speak out so that we can prevent the 44 years being the gap in between when you see your children again. If it has to happen for a few years, that's bad enough. We don't want it to go on for decades. So when I found him, I did kick myself. And I struggled with it quite a bit, wondering what differences would I have had. And then I go back to when I was adopted. The state that I was adopted in didn't do their due diligence. They actually failed me, and they failed my father because they waived the mandatory investigation to locate him prior to allowing someone else to adopt me. And they decided that based on the false information provided in an affidavit, based on timeline. So I've created a timeline of the events that occurred. The timeline is off, and they took it at face value. And because she had someone ready to step in and take on the role, and this is where I have a problem with some adoptions and some step family blending, that because there was somebody willing didn't mean that they should be able to just waive the mandatory investigation and give the child to someone else. That my father deserved to know. He deserved that investigation to occur. I deserved for that investigation to occur. Could have been reunited at 8 years old instead of 48 years old. So then I think of all of these things that happen, and if I would have found out sooner, I would have had more time. We were going to sign the readoption papers. I had them sitting on my desk ready to mail to him when I got the news that he passed away. So we missed out on that opportunity for him to readopt me. But if I started sooner, I would have had a lot more time to have accomplished that. And I could have had him reinstated as my father. So I go through a lot of those guilt cycles, quite frequently. And it depends on what I'm listening to or who I'm talking to or who I'm working with, when it hits, Father's Day, his birthday, all these things. So it's still, even though he's been gone since 2018, it still follows me. So all of this stuff is what I'm really trying to get to, is really a life sentence for a child. It's not something that just goes away. When you go through divorce, and I'm speaking from my own, once you get on the other side of it and you go in, you start living life again, it's not as traumatic as it was. But for the child, it still is. The child is the forgotten trauma. That's where all the trauma exists. It still resides there. And the court systems do nothing to help it. So we were talking earlier when we first started about justice. Justice has never been on the side of the child when it comes to that. They say that it's for the children, that they're trying to do what's best for the children, but they don't really understand what's best for the child when they tell a parent, wait until they're 18 and they'll come and look for you, because that is a myth. Wait until they're older and they'll know what to do. That is another myth. That does not happen. That does not happen. So the guilt and this trauma together causes a lot of long-term effects that everybody leaves for the child to deal with. So it's really important that they're included in the help and working through these solutions. And oftentimes we think, oh, they're resilient, they'll figure it out, but they're not going to figure it out on their own.
No. And they may not feel safe they may feel such guilt about being an accomplice or a participant in hurting their parent that they're afraid to. I hear parents all the time say, well, I'm here when the door's open.
Those moments too, where I think, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that. I can't believe that those were the last words I said to him.
Yeah.
In face to face. Because even as an adult, I was still dealing with trauma and my anxiety about the situation. And there was a situation that occurred that it didn't sit right with me. Now we got along very well, and we were doing really good at reuniting and connected. But I had a moment where I had to sit down with him and say, okay, this is really bothering me. And I have to talk to you about it, because otherwise I'm not going to want to come back. It got down to really that important. I'm not going to want to ever come back if we don't address this right now. And he had to stop and really listen. And he really did. He stopped and he gave me that space that I could just express to him that when you do this, it creates so much anxiety in me. It's through the roof. I can't deal with this.
Can I add something to that, Dawn?
Yeah.
Because from a parent's perspective, that's like 100% dead on, in the fact that, like, even with walking through the stuff with my daughter, she's figuring things out and trying to get things straight in her head, just like you did. there's pieces of it where we, as the non-custodial parent or whatever that is, we did have a play in this based off of our own traumas and our own wounds. And because we didn't know what to do. So obviously the children aren't going to know what to do because we don't even know how to say it to them. So it's like watching her, she's like, she understands that, there's a place in there where logically it makes sense that, you know, I've gone through my stuff and and all that, and we can work through that piece. That's easy enough. But the bottom line is, as a child, as a little child, you don't know what you don't know. You blame yourself because you're not emotionally able to deal with circumstances and situations, especially that hard.
Internalizing it.
Yeah. And she said there's a part of this where she's still hurt. It doesn't matter what the hurt is. It doesn't matter what I did or didn't do. There's still a pain there.
Absolutely 100% true. Because my little girl is still really angry at my mom for taking me. Still to this day.
She doesn't, and a lot of kids still don't know the whole story. At least you have an idea and an understanding from doing all that follow-up research and whatever of what happened. She doesn't even know the whole story. So she's working off of what she thinks she knows based off of what she saw. And there were probably things that I did or didn't do within that realm too, that I get to, you know, take responsibility for.
Well, that's that kernel of truth, you know, like you know, there, as I said, parents are not perfect, right? So there is some kernel of truth there, some grain of truth. And it's one of the reasons why as parents, we have to say, gosh, you know, I screw up. I didn't handle this right. It's not an all or nothing.
No.
Right.
But that kernel of truth ends up being blown out of proportion too. And so that's why we feel defensive. But, you know, Dawn, I would say to you that I think it was a great compliment and gift to your father for you to sit down with him and tell him your feelings and tell him that you were upset and tell him what you needed from him.
It changed the relationship a lot.
Absolutely. And I would tell you, if that was the last thing you ever said to him, that would have still been a great compliment.
The ending of it was good. The beginning of it was, I can't believe that was the last face-to-face conversation I had with him. So I went through a little guilt with that as well. But we did have great conversations over the phone after that. Great. Absolutely.
Right. Well, and I would say, once again, I think it was a great compliment to him. And I think he saw it that way, right? Because in the end, once you are alienated from your child, you would give anything to have any kind of conversation or contact. And so that was what that would tell me, if I was him, was that you trusted me enough and loved me enough to share with me what you were worried or scared about. So I would say to you that he probably was thrilled that you could do that with him.
And I have to say that one of the things that he did extremely well, and if I can give advice to any parent out there listening, is the way he handled my questioning to him. Whenever I questioned him, it was not easy to hear, you know, well, my mom told me this. First of all, I don't know if it's true or not. Then he has to sit there and say, he has to realize, okay, so she knows the story and has to decide, what are you going to tell me? And then he also has to say, that's not even true. That never happened. But instead of just coming right out and telling me that your mom lied to you about that, he never said that. He stopped and he said, first of all, I want you to know that I loved your mother and I still do. And here's my side. And then he said, I don't know any Hell's Angels, so I'm not sure how this story could possibly be true. I think there was one person that might have been a Hell's Angel. So he kind of like, he gave me the answer without being insulting. And he just said his side, but he prefaced it with the fact that he loved my mom. So he didn't make me feel bad about my other half in the process. Mm-hmm. He made sure that he uplifted that and more or less supported that relationship. You know,
you're right. You are that. Thank you, because like that helps validate me in how I've been relating to my son and daughter in the same way. I don't bash their father. I go in and I'm like, well, hopefully he's doing well. I hope he's healthy, you know, and I still, because he's still their father. It's not there. Like Danica was saying, she wanted that to be, there for them, where it's like they had that opportunity to have a relationship with their father through her. And this is way beyond that, but this is still happening, you know, and it's still, you as a parent, you still get to create that safe space, even if their father is doing something different or treating them in a certain way. That's not for me to say or not say, whether it's whatever. That's for them to figure that part out, but I still can support them through their relationship with him by not bashing him.
That's super important. And so as I share this, I've been writing it out, and I named it. It's the Patrick Protocol.
Yeah.
It's a protocol I think that parents can use as a model. Not that I don't know that he would have been perfect every time. I don't know that any parent would be perfect all the time, but it gives you an idea of how to react or how to act around your children when you're in the situation.
Yeah. And okay, so just to swing a little bit here. So what that does is it creates love. It puts us in a different space when we've gone through all that stuff and we've healed all that stuff, and the things that come up. I mean, Danica, whatever you use the word blessings, I'm going to share that. The blessings that come out of these things that these processes and these things that happen are, I want to say freedom. I want to say self-love. I want to say more love that I could even ever imagine with my children, you know, that kind of thing. I want to say that there's a now a big energy. Like my son is reaching out to me here and there, and he's like, "Hey mom, how you doing?" Woo! That's never happened, you know. So these are the things, Danica, these are the blessings that show up for me. I think this is what you were talking about. For me, that's what happens, you know, and it makes me know that now I can live my life knowing that my children are moving forward in their lives, and they're doing what they need to do and what they want to do. And I still get to create my life at the same time. And that's a blessing right there in itself for my perspective. So,
which is,
yeah.
I just wanted to transition into the fact that that Dawn and Caroline and myself have been working on a community, our own personal gift to make a difference, which is called Hope for Families. And it's a community, it's a platform, it's a movement. And part of these panel discussions we're doing every month to help families go through help to support them. We do this through this platform called Hope for Families. And really want to showcase the good work of people like Jana Haney. And we also want, with the goal that if we can somehow bring these amazing professionals, shine the light on the good work that they are able to do and serve to you, then we've actually helped the Jana Haneys of the world to reach out to even more people, more parents. That's really the only way to change the world is, through just getting up
one part at a time.
That's
On
right.
that note, can Jana take a moment here to tell people how they can reach out to you, and if you have anything else you would like to add to the discussion that we've had so far?
Well, it's been my privilege and pleasure to be here. I think that these topics are difficult. I mean, I was listening to Caroline talk about the blessings that come from this. And I know, though, that for the first 5 years that I was struggling with stuff, I was very unhappy. I was very resentful. It was not fair. And I did not understand why I had to learn any of this.
Yes.
crap.
Yes.
And then what happens though is, and this is the piece that does, I think, can give people hope, and it's what you were talking about, which is when you learn these very difficult things that you don't want to learn and you shouldn't have to learn, but you do learn, then at some point you recognize that you are actually a better person because you learned them. You're a better wife or a better father or a better husband or a better person because you've gone through these difficult things, as hard as they are, and I would not wish them on anybody. But with that being said, this is where you take lemons or horrible things and you make lemonade, and you can come out of the other side of it and it will have been worth it. But I think at the very beginning in particular, it is just so incredibly hard. And I want to make sure that everyone understands that we are not, and I am not glossing over the excruciating pain that comes from these situations for families around the world, for mothers and for fathers. And so my website is thebridgeacross.com. It's actually in transition, but it's a pretty basic website. And I work with clients like this all the time, but I also try to provide them referrals. And I really encourage my clients to get help from more than one source. I think organizations like yours are incredibly essential and probably provide more support than just the one-on-one that I do. I am getting ready to start some groups around this issue as well. But I just think we all have to work together. I think there are wonderful people out there, and the goal though is to help parents and children get all the support they need. You can't have too much support, and so I'm very grateful for your organization and for listening to you all today.
We are very, very grateful for you for joining us and being part of this and part of our July discussion on raising children independent of divorce. One thing I wanted to point out of what you said about, you have to go through this stuff and it's not fun, and we understand and recognize that there's so much pain here. But one thing I do want to say is the going through it part is the healing part, where we can't stay in the place where our life changed, because everybody else is going on with life, and we also have to continue on with life. As hard as that sounds, I don't want anybody to think I'm saying that to be hard on it. I just want everybody to embrace the opportunity to grow and become the better person on the other side. And it's not easy. There's always going to be hurdles. There's always going to be pain in there, but the more you grow, the more you can maybe have a reunion sooner rather than later. All kinds of good things can come from that willingness to step through the growth, is all I'm trying to say, really.
Yes.
But thank you. You've provided so much value in what you've shared with our audience today. And I really am glad that you came on. I hadn't met you before, but I'm glad I have now. So anybody that wants to get more information with Dana, go ahead to her webpage, which is www.thebridgeacross.com, and reach out to her. Caroline, do you want to give a quick how people can reach out to you as well?
Sure. I am reachable at this point through just carolinerena@yahoo.com. My website is temporarily down. I do have a blog if you want to follow my blog. That's up to you. But I can't remember the name of it right now. So maybe we can post that on. Hold on a second.
Well, add it to the comments.
Yeah, add it to I'll do that.
Yes.
But
Okay.
I have a blog, which is actually my goal in life is to guide people. And I want you to see the work that I'm doing and what I'm walking through. So as you see that, and as you can connect with me, then you can decide if you want to work, but it's transformational coaching. It walks you through all kinds of different things from, and you got to be ready. I'm just telling you, you got to be ready to do this. This isn't like traditional.
Taking the gloves off. It's time to fight.
Well, yeah. Yeah. So I tend to get a little supportive here in a different way, where it's like stuff's going to come up and we're going to plow through it. And it's coaching. It's not the, like I said, the therapy work. And that's all learned from the process that I've gone through. So, and I tend to persist, I tend to plow through, and I tend to do it that way. And I've been to many amazing therapists and, done different types of work. And now I'm like, okay, you're right. To take the gloves, put the gloves on. We're going in, that type of thing. So CarolineRena@yahoo.com, and it's all through love and support, and it's a very safe space, even though it sounds kind of challenging, but
It sounds
always
fabulous. I love it that you're a straight talker. I'm sure it's fabulous.
Yeah.
I'm referring, so.
That's awesome. And that's what we do here at Hope for Families is we provide a team of people to help transition through a very, very difficult time. Nobody wants to be in this position. Nobody expects to be in this position, but when in the event that you are in this position, we have people that can help and help you go through that with the most amicable outcome as possible. We want to avoid the high conflict in court. If we can keep it out of the courtroom and we can help you have an amicable divorce, that's our main goal. In the event that it does need to go to court, you still have access to team with counselors, with attorneys that can help answer questions and that kind of thing. So I'm Dawn McCarty. You can reach me. I'm on Facebook under Dawn McCarty, or Securing Everything, which is one of those two will help you find me everywhere. And then I wanted to give Danica a moment to wrap it up with the Hope for Families vision.
Our vision is to be not only support the professionals who are they're in the heart profession. They're there to make a difference in families' lives. And of course, we're there to collectively, collaboratively bring all of these resources into one space so the families know that they have a whole team that has their back. And in our community, we have a directory of professionals. We're also curating all of the events that are speaking to our tribe on our calendar. And of course, we have a learning management system for courses that you might have to take or you might want to take for professional development as a practitioner or as a family member. The goal is to make you strong so that you're not living in that what if world of resignation and disempowerment. And I just wanted to bring up that next month, August, is our back to school month. So that's the topic of our panel discussion next month, is how do we deal with that transition when we're in a high conflict custody situation.
That's going to be a super important discussion too, because I know that's a big question in this area on how do we co-parent, and kids are going to school and from one home and then going home to a different home occasionally. So how can we best make that transition easy on children? So I look forward to that next month. And again, Jana, thank you again for joining us today. This was a really great conversation. So everybody reach out to her, www.thebridgeacross.com, CarolineRena@yahoo.com, and Hope for Families and Kids Need Both on Facebook is how you can get in touch with any one of us. So until next month, we'll talk to you then. Bye everybody.